Hey guys, it's Josh here. And in today's video, I want to talk about how I died in meditation and the things that I learned through that experience. So, obviously, I'm not dead, obviously, I'm alive, but what I went through could be described as an ego death, right? And one very clear transformation that happened through that ego death is before I died, I had hair. After I died, I decided to shave my head. So I really did go through a death or a letting go of an old version of my identity, which created this space for a new identity to come through, right? Like a rebirth. And this was the experience that I had. I really feel like I had a rebirth. So if you're someone who is interested in meditation, you're interested in spirituality, you're interested in awakening, and you're familiar with this topic of like letting go, but you struggle with it. You're kind of scared of letting go because you don't know what's on the other side. You're scared of the unknown, right? So maybe you're interested in transformation, but at the same time you're also scared and nervous of what that's actually going to look like for you. And I totally get it because it is scary. It can be very scary to go into the unknown and to not know what's on the other side. And so I'm going to share with you my experience of actually going through that process uh, myself. And, you know, it came about in the most unexpected way. I I wasn't planning on having this experience. It just happened. And like so many of the greatest things that have ever happened to me in my life, they were unplanned. They were unknown. I didn't know they were going to happen. They just happened. And this was one of them, right? It was back in 2020. And I left Sydney, Sydney, Australia. I used to live in Sydney, Australia, before COVID, and then COVID hit, and I decided to leave Sydney because I'm not actually from Sydney. I'm from Queensland, so it's a different state. And I decided when COVID hit that I didn't want to be in Sydney because I didn't want to be stuck in the city, right? Because it was going to be a shit show. I just knew that being in the city in COVID was going to be a shit show, so I didn't want to be there. So I said, all right, I'm going to go back to Queensland, where I'm from. Anyway, moved back up here, and I left my job, I left my career, I left everything that I was doing uh, for a restart, like a fresh start. I ended up moving on to a farm, and I was living on a farm for a little while in 2020. It was like an organic farm where I would work and I would, exchange some of my time uh, helping out on the farm for food and accommodation. And it was a great little setup, and it was really cool. It was a really interesting experience to have. And I didn't know it at the time, but it would be a restart for me in ways that I couldn't quite fathom um, at that point in time. Right? I just thought, oh, I'll move on to a farm. That'll be cool. It'll be a different experience. It'll be fun. It's COVID. Why not? And the world seems to be kind of at a stop anyway, so I might as well go and do something that I would never normally do, which is live on a farm and work on an organic farm. So I did that. Um, you know, at this point, I had been meditating for about 10 years, in my own personal practice, and I had some pretty interesting experiences, right? I went over to India for a while to practice meditation and yoga. I had a lot of my own personal experiences with meditation where I felt I was healing, different parts of myself, different trauma and stuff like that. And I had a lot of benefit from meditation at this point in time, but I had never had an experience quite like this ego death that I was about to have, right, in 2020. So I was on this farm, and yeah, like I said, I've been meditating for 10 years, but I didn't know what was going to happen. I never thought that what was about to happen would happen. And so this one evening, I remember lighting a fire, and it was in the early hours of the afternoon, and I lit a fire because I had a little campsite by myself, and I got my journal out and I did some intention setting. I did some journaling, and then I went and did a long meditation by myself. And in this particular meditation, uh, I really had this experience of what I can only call death. I felt at one stage the life completely leaving my body to the point where it's hard to explain that feeling, but it felt like the life was just leaving my body and I was becoming weak. the energy was going out of my body, and I had this feeling of like falling backwards, and I ended up coming up and bringing myself back up into consciousness, and then I went on this very deep journey. And just for a little bit more context, uh, this whole period in 2020, I was going through a big shift in my identity. I was, before that, I was working corporate job in Sydney, and I didn't really like what I was doing. I felt no purpose, but at the same time, I didn't know what I was doing. So with this meditation and with this intention setting and the fire and everything, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, my intention was just for some clarity of like what to do next, right? My intention was to get some guidance. And yeah, the only way that I can explain it is like I felt the life leaving my body, like draining out of me in this deep meditative state. And I really am thankful for my meditation practice and for my experience in meditation that led up to that, because that was quite a scary experience that happened. I had to fully let go of. I had to let go of myself. Really, in that moment, I had to almost accept that I was going to die, because to resist that would have become a nightmare. It would have become a very intense and dark experience if I was trying to resist that. So instead, I just accepted it. I accepted I was going to die. And I just kind of allowed myself to go through that experience of feeling like the life was leaving my body. And I was able to stay very present through that experience. And yeah, it was transformative, to say the least. So I continued with my meditation, and I continued through the evening just in silence, going through a whole range of feelings and emotions, and there was no real clarity that came on that evening, other than just a deep feeling of being connected to everything in a kind of multi-dimensional way that is beyond the grasp of the mind. I don't think you could ever fully understand the kind of experience that I had without having the actual experience yourself. And this is why I think obviously people are so fascinated by spirituality, because you can go and have these experiences, and they're not common. I'm not trying to say that this was a common experience. And even as I mentioned, I had been meditating for 10 years before I had this experience, and so I never expected it to happen. I wasn't planning for it. I wasn't even trying to get that experience, to be honest. I never meditated to have this like crazy transcendental mystical experience. I meditated because I just wanted to become calm, and I wanted to learn how to move through life with ease. And that's why I was meditating, right? I wasn't meditating to have these transformative experiences. They just happened. And that's one thing that I always talk about within my coaching community and to my students that I teach now. I never tried to force these things to happen. They just happened, right? It just happened. It was not like I was forcing it or trying to push it. I do that in other areas of my life. I would say that I try to force certain things in other areas of my life, but I've never tried to force or push my spiritual journey. And I think that's been a blessing in hindsight, because things have just happened, and I've just been able to have these crazy experiences through being unattached to the outcome of my spiritual process, right? So that's something that's worthwhile mentioning, because sometimes people get into spirituality and meditation because they want to have these crazy experiences, uh, and in my experience, that's not the best way to do it, because you're putting too much pressure on yourself, right? And you're really missing the purpose of the practice of meditation, and so it can become counterintuitive, where you don't have the experiences that you want to be having because you're trying too hard to have them. It's just like anything in life, right? You try too hard, and what you're trying to get usually kind of, escapes you. So anyway, I had this crazy experience. I went deep into the meditation. I felt myself die. I felt my body kind of die, and I had this full emotional feeling experience of what I felt like it would be like to die. And then I remember coming towards the end of it, I just felt ecstatic, like really ecstatic. And um, that's the word that I use. It was ecstasy. when I realized that I was still alive, I was just so grateful and so overfilled with joy and ecstasy that I was still alive. I was beyond grateful. I remember getting some water and turning the tap on and just almost crying because the water came out, and I was just in awe that the water would just come out of the tap just by me turning it on. At that point in time, that was just an incredible thing that I had available to me, was just running water. So yeah, that was really interesting. And I went into this. I would honestly say it was like a borderline kind of psychosis because I was laughing. I was like really in ecstasy of like, oh my god, I'm still alive. Uh, and that lasted for a little while until I made myself a cup of tea and I ended up, falling asleep. The next day, I woke up and I remember just wanting to ground myself. So I was living on the farm at that time. So what I did is I literally went and just did some mulching. We have a community garden, or we had a community garden on the farm, and at that point in time there was a big pile of mulch that needed to be dispersed throughout the garden. And so I just remember I'm saying to myself in the morning, I'm just going to go and do the mulching because that felt like something that was going to bring me back down to earth and really ground me back into this physical plane. uh, and that was really really helpful. And then over the next few months, that's when I had this experience of just being completely let go of my old self. So a few months later, or maybe it was a few weeks later, I can't remember exactly, I went to have breakfast with my family for Mother's Day. And my sister was sitting across the table from me, and she said, "Josh, you need to have a haircut. Like, your hair is just getting too long." And I just said, "Shave it off. Like, shave it off. I really think you should just shave it off." So my sister shaved my head uh, at the table of my, our family breakfast on Mother's Day in 2020. And since then, I've been bald. And again, I mention that only because it's a physical or symbolic representation of the spiritual transformation or activation or awakening that I had, where I really did just let go of an old identity and stepped into a completely new identity. Later that year in 2020, I had some synchronicities happen in my life where I actually got the opportunity to become a meditation teacher. So before this event, I never thought that I would be a meditation teacher. After this event, I had these synchronicities pop up into my life where it was just like, here, you've got this opportunity to be a meditation teacher. And it just seemed like um, the most logical thing that I could do. It was like, it would be silly of me to do anything else. And so I did that. Uh, and then I started teaching, right? And again, this was after 10 years of practice, after these profound experiences, then I started to teach. And, since then, that was the end of 2020, my first class I taught in January 2021, and it's now, 2025. So I've been teaching for 5 years, and I've just been on my purpose for the last 5 years. And I haven't done anything else apart from focus on teaching and coaching and helping others to find freedom from their mind and to master their mind. That's literally all I do now. I've created the business where I teach and I coach and I help people, usually people who are stressed out and anxious, or just afraid of their mind, or having problems in their mind, or having problems with their emotion. And I help them to just get themselves back, right? To get themselves back to a calm, happy, confident, and peaceful life, to get them back to their true self, right? And that's really what I do, most days when I'm not hanging out with my wife and daughter. Yeah, I'm just working and helping people, living my purpose. If you want to learn more about how I do that and the kind of methods that I use, with my students and with my clients, there's actually a free training on my website. So I'll put the link in the description of this video. You can just go to the link, go to my website, watch the free training there. It walks you through how it all works, how I help people, my method, case studies from people who I've helped over the years. And then there's some instructions for how to work with me if you would like some help with that. There's a link to book a call on the same page. So you can book a call and we can have a chat if you'd like. But yeah, this all happened after this experience of dying, feeling like I was going to die. I really think when I do die, when I actually die, uh, it's going to feel like that. It's going to feel like the experience that I had, where the life will just leave me, and it'll be like this. It was really kind of like a soft feeling, like a softness came over my body, um, kind of like if you're fainting. But sometimes fainting can be a little bit scary, and you feel a bit disorientated. Whereas this felt more uh, calm and relaxed. Um, yeah, I don't know. Who knows? We'll find out one day. But I really believe that that's the experience I had. It felt like I was dying, and yeah, at that point, I was able to just let go of all of these, ideas about who I was, what was important, what was not important, and then not long after that, that's when again I said I found my purpose, and it just popped up. It just kind of arrived, and then it's just been common sense to just follow it for the last 5 years. So the key things that I learned is that it's not scary, right? Death is not as scary as we think it is. I felt so calm and so warm and so peaceful in that process of dying, that I honestly believe when it does happen now, it's gonna be okay, right? Everything's gonna be okay, and I'm gonna be connecting back into some everlasting, eternal consciousness that's always there anyway, and which is really where we came from in the first place. So this has kind of been my experience anyway. Those are the things that I learned. And another thing that kind of has become clear to me since that experience is that, you know, it's life is really about helping others. Uh, firstly, it's about helping yourself, and then it's about helping others. So I wouldn't have been able to have that experience if I hadn't have been committed to my meditation practice over the 10 years prior. But I was committed to my meditation practice, and I wanted to get myself into a state of well-being and health and vitality and peace. And I became devoted to that practice for 10 years. I was disciplined. I showed up for myself, and I got myself into these crazy experiences and this profound insight. And then at one point the penny just dropped, and I realized, okay, well, now I just have to help other people do this as well. And then so again, it was about me helping myself firstly, and then now helping others. And so that's my experience dying through meditation and having an ego death, if you want to call it that, having a spiritual awakening, if you want to call it that. I feel like all of those experiences are pretty much the same in different flavors. And yeah, I feel so blessed that I have had that experience. And I've actually had a few of those experiences to varying degrees. And I think it's important to mention that at the end of this video, because a lot of people think that there's going to be one spiritual awakening that you're going to have, and it's going to make everything clear. And in my experience, there's been awakenings, and then there's been awakening, and then awakening, and then awakening. And so, you have one awakening, and then you awaken again further, and then further and further. So the first time I meditated when I was 17 years old could have been my first awakening, right? When I first started to practice it. Then when I went to India, I had some experiences that I could have called awakening experiences, where I first experienced bliss and ecstasy and joy through meditation. Not as intense as this death experience, but still quite intense. And then I had the death experience, and even after that, I went and did my meditation teacher training, where I felt cracked open and awakened into an even different level of awareness. And and then the wheel keeps turning. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. If you do want to learn more about how I help people, then you can go to my website. There's a link below this video. And as always, thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.